Hi, my name is John Zimmerman. I'm the Vice President of the Miami Valley Fair Housing Center. Today, I'm going to do a short video called Fair Housing Tips for Welcoming People with Disabilities. And I'm going to use a PowerPoint, so we're going to get right to it. So in your notes for the YouTube video down below in the description, you're going to see all of this information. Our address at 505 Riverside Drive, Dayton, Ohio, 45405. Our phone number, 937-223-6035. Our website is www.mvfairhousing.com. And you can email us at info@mvfairhousing.com. The Miami Valley Fair Housing Center is a private nonprofit. It's operated by a board of directors. And our mission is to eliminate housing discrimination against all persons because of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, which includes sexual orientation and gender identity, disability, familial status, or any other characteristic protected under state or local laws, such as Ohio's protection of ancestry and people that are currently serving in the military, or Dayton, Ohio's protection for age and marital status. To further this goal, Miami Valley Fair Housing Center engages in activities designed to encourage fair housing practices through educational efforts. So here we are today on YouTube. We also go out into the public, and we do lots of mailings to jurisdictions to get our brochures throughout the community. We assist people who believe they have been victims of housing discrimination. We try to identify any barriers that come up that would be a discriminatory housing practice, and we try to do things to counteract or eliminate it. We work with our local government officials to protect and improve fair housing laws and take all the necessary actions to ensure fair housing laws are properly and fairly enforced throughout our region, the state of Ohio, and nationally. Here is a great slide, and all these links will be in the description below. So you can write to info@mvfairhousing.com. And if you go to our website, on the left of the screen, you'll see filing a complaint. And I'm going to show you that screen in just a moment. Also, if you're inside the city of Dayton, you should be calling the City of Dayton Human Relations Council first at 333-1403, or visit their website and you'll have this address. This, when you go to filing a housing discrimination complaint on our website, is what the page looks like. Again, it has information for the City of Dayton Human Relations Council, and it has some other links to other pages in the website. But this is a simple form that if you fill out and you submit it, it will go to a fair housing specialist. They will review it and give you a call back within 24 hours or sometime between Monday at 8 a.m. through Friday afternoon at 5 p.m. Now, other places that help enforce fair housing is the Ohio Civil Rights Commission, and you can go to this link or call them at 888-278-7101, or HUD, and you can speak with a Fair Housing Equal Opportunity. FHEO is Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Intake Specialist by calling 800-669-9777 or 800-877-8339. Our topic today is fair housing tips for welcoming people with disabilities. We believe that's important because the screen I'm showing you are statistics from 2019, and you can see that in the top 5 areas of complaints, race, disability, familial status, national origin, and gender, that red, disability, is going through the roof, no matter who collects these statistics. Starting from the left, NFHA is the National Fair Housing Alliance, and they have about 100 members that report statistics to them. There's HUD, who collects its own statistics. There's FHAP, which is Fair Housing Assistance Program, and that's cities like Dayton or states like Ohio that get money through the Fair Housing Assistance Program to help with fair housing across the state or in their city. And then on the far right is DOJ, or the Department of Justice, who litigates cases for HUD. The breakdown, you'll see that race was about 17%, familial status almost 8%, sex, which is almost 7%. It was up from the former years. National origin, about 6%, color, religion, and then the other category, which was about 11%, including sexual orientation, source of income, complaints involving domestic violence, gender identity, age, marital status, and military status, and others. But look at this. The reason we have today's video is because disability complaints accounted for 17,010 complaints out of the approximately 30,000 complaints, or 59%. Most were for denials of requests for reasonable accommodations, and others were failure to construct new housing with the required features for physical access. In a situation where the disability and the need are obvious, a statement from a requester about the disability and the connection to the requested accommodation is all a housing provider needs to process a request. So as you saw in the former slide, that many of the complaints were based on reasonable accommodations. And sometimes when someone has a reasonable accommodation, the housing provider may not see the connection, and they ask for a third-party verification, but they don't need to. Most people with disabilities know what their problem is, and if it is obvious and we know the person has a disability, the statement from the requester should be all the housing provider needs. So here's the guidance. So just to repeat some stuff, if a person's disability is obvious or otherwise known to the provider, and if the need for the requested accommodation is also readily apparent or known, then the provider may not request any additional information about the requester's disability or the disability-related need for the accommodation. If a requester's disability is known or readily apparent to the provider, but the need for the accommodation is not readily apparent or known, the provider may request only information that is necessary to evaluate the disability-related need for the accommodation. A great example for this are service animals. For the first part of this quote from the Joint Statement on Reasonable Accommodations produced by HUD and the Department of Justice, if a person is blind and they have a service animal that is used for a CNI dog, for example, so the disability is obvious and the need could also be readily apparent. We don't ask for a third-party verification. Don't make people pay a copay for something that's just readily apparent. However, if the person comes in and says, I have a service animal and it's a companion animal that I use to assist me to enjoy my house better. Well, we might not know why they need the service animal, and they might say to us it's an emotional support animal. So the need for it and the how it's readily apparent, it may not be readily apparent. So we ask then for one of several types of documents. The thing that is most important to remember is that it be a reliable source. So a doctor or medical professional might give that. A non-medical service provider for somebody's caseworker, their licensed social worker, their attorney, lots of different people. It could be a peer support group from an ambulatory support group for veterans who have lost limbs, or it could be Alcoholics Anonymous, but a reliable support group. And so HUD at the end of their guidance says a reliable third party who is in a position to know about the individual's disability may also provide verification of a disability. So there's a lot of confusion around this, but this is really the best advice, is to follow what HUD and the DOJ recommend. So a provider does have an obligation to provide a prompt response to a reasonable accommodation request. And that reasonable accommodation request could be to add, say, a railing to a two-step walkway. And what we mean by a prompt response is not saying this is the day it's going to be in, but the prompt response is that, tell me about your need. And the person might say, well, I kind of walk a little bit wobbly, so it's really great for me to have this extra railing. And so the landlord may say, if they're in subsidized housing, well, we'll get back with you in a few days because we have to get some quotes, and we'll pay for it. But if it's a market rate landlord, not subsidized by HUD, that market rate landlord might say, I'm going to come up with some quotes and we'll see how much you have to pay. So that's really important for both housing providers and residents to talk about who pays, because different people pay in different situations. So an undue delay in responding to a reasonable accommodation request may be deemed to be a failure to provide that reasonable accommodation. So the best practice is when someone brings it up, that we just talk about it right then. We can't say, oh, it's going to be 3 weeks before I can take time to listen to your request. We should do it promptly. So, and to do it promptly, HUD recommends an interactive process which renders an individual assessment in which the housing provider and the requester, quote, discuss the requester's disability-related need for the requested accommodation and possible alternative accommodations is helpful to all. And so in certain situations, someone might say, I need to have a ramp put over this. And a landlord might say, and they should only do this if this is true, I have an apartment that is just like that one. It has all the features and it has a roll-in entrance. And so if it is a comparable apartment, that would be a good thing. But if it's not comparable, it might not be in anyone's best interest to make that suggestion. So it's an interactive process. People go back and forth and discover how we can fix the situation that the resident requesting the reasonable accommodation needs. So to end, these are some advice out of the joint statements on reasonable accommodation. Fair Housing Act does not require that a request be made in a particular manner or at a particular time. The request does not need to mention the act or use the words reasonable accommodation. It can be made by the requester. It can be made by a third-party requester. It can be made orally or in writing. And the requester does not have to use the provider's preferred forms. So on this third one, for example, if someone says, gosh, I'll just have my doctor write you a letter, or I'll have my attorney write you a letter on their letterhead so you have all their contact information, that should suffice. Under the Act, a resident or an applicant for housing makes a reasonable accommodation request whenever she makes clear to the housing provider that she is requesting an exception. This was a quick view on fair housing tips for welcoming people with disabilities. Please check the YouTube description for all the links.